breaker. This is BB1. Over. Magandang hapon po muli sa inyo mga ka-TryNation. Ito na naman po kanyang lingkod, si BB1 ng Try to Contact. Ayan, kamusta na po ba kayo muli mga ka-TryNation? Diyan sa inyong mga 2-0 o sabi nga sa inyong mga location. Ayan, teka, background music muna tayo ng konti naman dyan. Yon. Yan. So, yun po, no? So, nung nakaraan, pinag-usapan po natin yung kay Sir W3ZQZ. May kinalaman po dun sa NFED antennas. Ayan. So today po, ipagpapatuloy niya sa atin yung pag-explain yung tungkol dyan sa NFED antenna na yan. Konting review, sabi nga. Diba? Pagkatapos mag-lecture ni Sir, kailangan natin ang review. Ayan. So magre-review mamaya si W3ZQZ. Ayan. So mamaya po, abangan po natin yan. Ano? And then, kamusta na po ba yung ating antenna na ipamimigay? Ayan. So ano po ba yung gagawin natin dun sa antena? Like yung pinag-usapan po natin, meron pong ipamimigay na antena si Sir Sir YVX. Ayan. So, yung kanyang ginawang antena, napaka-generous na itong tao na to at gusto kayo bigyan ng antena. Ngayon, ang problema natin, syempre hindi naman natin basta-basta maibibigay yung antena nang walang recipient. Sabi nga. So ano po ba yung gusto nyong gawin doon sa antena natin? Siyempre, papag-giveaway natin siya. Pero ano po ba ang gagawin natin? Pinakamaraming likes and share? Ayan, suggest naman po kayo. Ayan. Kung ano po yung magandang gawin natin doon sa antena, siyempre, kailangan na radio user ka para magamit mo yung antenang iyon. Ayan. So, yun po, no? At siyempre, yun na nga. Alam niyo naman yung ating tawag dito, SOP, Ayan. Hinahanap ko lang po yung yung tissue. Ayan, wala akong tissue dahil sa, syempre, ito naman po yung nosebleed section of W3ZQZ. Ayan, so syempre, kailangan na nating magsimula. At without further ado, syempre, intro muna natin si Sir W3ZQZ.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm James, W3ZQZ, and we'll be covering the NFED antenna basic review. Now, this is a bit of a cleanup from last week because I didn't have the graphics I wanted, but let's see if we can get a clearer picture on things with the appropriate graphics. So without further ado, let's see here if I can actually share screen and have it actually function for a change. And let's see, one moment here, and here we go. So we're going to take a look. Hopefully you can see that right now, what I'm sharing here. And now, as we take a look at this here, Oops, let's close that up there. What we have is the in-fed versus the center-fed dipole, but we have to get into a little bit of basics here. Now, as we see here, the electrical impedance is a measure of the total opposition that a circuit or a part of a circuit presents to electrical current. Now, impedance includes both resistance and reactance. Now, what is reactance? Reactance is the opposition of a circuit element to the flow of current due to that element's inductance or capacitance. So the opposition to the flow of current can be inductive from an inductor, a coil, or capacitance, generally from a capacitor. But you don't necessarily need those components for an electrical circuit to display this and this here. So reactance acts similar to resistance and opposes current flow. Now, the greater reactance leads to smaller currents for the same voltage applied. So now we get to the antenna. Now just visualize our antenna from last week here. And as we see, we have the what we call input impedance. The input impedance of an antenna is basically the impedance offered by the antenna at its terminals. So we have the coaxial cable going up, and just where it meets the antenna there, we have the input impedance. Remember, this is, again, total opposition of a combination of resistance, inductive, and capacitive reactance here. Throwing some terms at you here, but maybe you get the gist of it. Now, it is defined as the ratio of voltage to the current across the two input terminals of the antenna. Now, when using a dipole antenna, as with any other form of antenna, the feed impedance and a knowledge of the best way to feed it are of particular importance. Now, we just want to remember that here. And here's the key. To ensure the optimum transfer of energy from the feeder, which is usually the transmission line, or the dipole antenna feed impedance, we can say it should be the same as that of the input or load impedance. So there you have it, the feed impedance and the load impedance for the maximum transfer or optimum transfer of energy here should be the same or close to the same. Now, by matching the dipole feed impedance or dipole characteristic impedance to the load, the antenna is able to operate to its maximum efficiency and maximum transfer of power takes place. So again, when you match the transmission line, basically, in oversimplified terms, impedance here to the load, which is generally the antenna, then the maximum transfer of power take place. So in order to ensure that impedance matching is maintained, there are several ways in which a dipole can be fed by its feeder. So now, of course, what do we have here? We have what we would call the feeder, also transmission line, feed impedance again. And these here, the impedance here should match with this. So if this is 50 ohms and this is 50, then you have the maximum transfer of power for sure. Now, let's close this here. Hopefully that is show up. Now, also the same thing with the other dipoles as well. Let's just take a look here. Let's see if hopefully this will show up for the share. Now it says my screen sharing is paused for some reason. And let's take a look here on why. So let's do this here. So now, again, we have some examples of the dipole being fed. Each side is a quarter wavelength. And of course, we have what I was discussing last week, the radiation pattern. Here, if it's in the vertical configuration, that's what it would look if you actually can see it. And the same thing here with a multi-band dipole. So again, your feed impedance, which generally is 50, sometimes persons use 75 ohm coaxial cable. Also for 450 ohm ladder line is popular, but whatever it is, at this point here, it should match. And normally what they have, which I'm not showing here, is what we call a balance, unbalanced, or balance. And that kind of, depending, it could be 1 to 4 or some other to match the impedance with the dipole. So what we can do here, let's see, is we're going to, again, share screen, and we're going to look at some in-fed dipoles here. And just one moment, if we can do that, just bear with me. And I'm all over the place. Okay, so here we go. Let's go back here a little bit and go back to our explanation of the fed dipole. Now, here's the key. It says by matching the dipole feed impedance or dipole characteristic impedance to the load, the antenna is able to operate to its maximum efficiency. Okay, we got that. And in order to ensure that impedance matching is maintained, there are several ways in which a dipole can be fed by its feeder. Of course, we discussed the center fed as well, and no doubt. And we can just jump on down to the in-fed. Now, normally, ideally on the chart, they would say about 73, 75 ohms. But because of the proximity of different things, environment and so forth, usually it gets closer to 50. And that's why we have coaxial cables commercially made for 50. Now we have the in-fed half-wave antenna, sometimes referred to as a ZEP antenna. And of course, there's some debate about what the ZEP exactly is. We're not going to get into that, but that is just a piece of wire 1/2 wave long with the feed line connected at one end. Now, the very common dipole antenna is a half wavelength that is broken at the center for connection to the feed line. But we want to think, of course, the in-fed is fed at the end. We had some examples of that last week. And like a dipole can be odd multiple of half wavelengths, 1/2, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, and so on. So as is, unlike a center fed dipole, an in-fed antenna has a very high input or load impedance. Now, of course, this makes sense because a dipole has high current at its center, but zero at the end. So the current in the center of a dipole is usually high, but in the end, at the very ends of it, no. And why? Because it really has nowhere to go. It has high voltage at its ends, but very low voltage across its center. So generally, center fed, high current but low voltage equals low impedance. End fed, high voltage but low current equals high impedance or high complex resistance here. So in order to match the end fed half wave antenna to the coaxial feeder, it is necessary, as emphasize that it's necessary to have a matching network right here. So that's what you want to do. You want to have a matching network or transmission line transformer. That is a must. Okay. So the coaxial feeder is likely to be 50 ohms, or it could be again fed with other types of transmission lines, 450. And the antenna itself, especially in-fed, the impedance can be somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 ohms typically, or it could be anything really. But this we can stick with that range. Now, often the transformer is used to perform this match. As it matches an unbalanced load to an unbalanced load, as opposed to the more familiar balun that matches a balanced to unbalanced line. So again, when we go a little further here, the impedance transformation could be as much as, here's an example, 50 to 5,000 or 1 to 100. And of course, as the impedance at this point is not well defined, a lot of times, again, because, you know, this is just a guess sometime what that is on the antenna. But usually what happens is a 1:9 ratio transformer works. And also what some prefer to use here, 1:49 or 1:64. I don't see 1:64 that often, but usually 1:9, in some cases, or 1:49. This is again, transformer here for RF. Now, as far as the transformer is concerned too, so let's just take a look at this here. We'll just take an example of this for just a moment. And let's see if we can pull up some pics here of the in-fed dipole, or excuse me, correction, in-fed antenna. Let's just put it that way for the time being. Okay, I think I found one here. And let's see if we can, okay, we'll go back to sharing screen. And I would like to, okay, share this. So here we have what we call an in-fed half wavelength. It could be 7, 14 megahertz, 21, whatever, but it would be exactly here a half wavelength. And again, we can picture the center fed half wave dipole, but again, in fed. So we have a transformer with a primary side here and secondary side. This could be typically 1:9, as we saw, 1:64, as noted here. I'm going to just slide that over. And here we might have a little bit of what we call a counter voice. Now, in radio communication, a counterpoise here is a network of probably of suspended horizontal wires here, and a lot of times or it could be cable, and it is used as a substitute for earth or ground in radio communications system. So you'll see this setup here oftentimes that that can be a nice substitute, the counterpoise here, and use. Now, if we go over to our next picture, again, something very similar, very simplified, your antenna wire, antenna support. And here's something by a K0DTQ. I think N4UJW posted that. We give credit to them. And we have dipole 66 and half feet long here. And looking at this here, this would be the what we call counterpoise wire going down. And again, this kind of acts like a ground, and it's more or less a substitute for ground. This is a little bit of a different type of in-fed antenna, although someone would debate and say this could be off-center, but for all purposes, we call this in-fed. And this here also, it appears to be multi-band 80, 40, 20, 15 here. So this is a nice idea, no doubt, of the in-fed antenna here, because for all practicality, it might not be effective, convenient to center feed from your house. Now, this here you can pick up on Lazada, for example. You have your coaxial cable coming in, and then your RF transformer, and of course the antenna. So this is made by the QRP guys, no tune in-fed wave antenna. So as you see, it tells you 80-meter band, 125 feet, 60, 40 meters, 61 feet, 6 inches, the approximate length of wire for this to work here. And again, fairly easy. If you cut it to these lengths, generally speaking, you'll be looking at minimum, hopefully, if everything's done correct, reflective power, or maximum power transfer to the antenna. So again, that kind of takes care of the in-fed dipole antenna here. And of course, let me correct that. That's the in-fed half wavelength antenna. We also have in-fed random length, and that's where perhaps a higher ratio transformer would come in at as well. So in review here, in-fed half-wave antennas have become very popular and as a very convenient, low visual impact antenna that is easy to erect for home and also for portable use. It's straightforward to build, it's low cost, there are many options available for purchase as well, why many prefer to build on their own. And of course, with a little care, the in-fed half-wave, or also known as the EFHW antenna, is an ideal choice for many ham radios and other forms of radio communication. I've always been a center-fed guy myself, but in the near future, I'll probably be experimenting with the in-fed half-wave. So that concludes our in-fed versus center fed antenna basics. And go ahead, give it a try, because you never know unless you try. So this is W3ZQZ, and I'll say 73s to you here. Until next time.
Yon, sabi ko nga nakamute eh. Ano ba naman? Parati kasi nagmamute eh. Ano ba? Ayun. So again, thank you very much Sir W3ZQZ. Ayan, isa na namang insight po. May kinalaman sa end-fed antennas versus center-fed antennas. Yan. Oh, so ayan nga po, no? Ayun, nakamute to, sabi ni Kapata. Pero okay na. Naririnig na nila. Ayan. So, yan. So, i-try nyo po, ano, mga ka-try. Ano? Yung antenna na yan at kung meron kayong mga challenges, panoorin nyo lang po ulit yung ating video. Yan, huwag nyo pong kalimutan ditong ipanood sa Facebook at syempre sa ating YouTube channel. Again, Sir W3ZQZ, thank you very much! Ayan, so sa mga susunod na mga episode po natin, ayan, pag-usapan naman natin yung ibang mga antennas. Ano, ayan, o kaya mga radios, review, ayan, namimiss na natin yan. At saka ganoon din naman yung ating mga panauhin, ano, yung mga interview natin, ano, namimiss ko na yung ano ano nga yung isa na yun, yung ano nga yung ginagawa nating isa? Yung ini-interview natin, ano? Yan, so susunod mag-interview tayo. Yun pala, tumawag po kami sa para kanina at napag-alaman po natin na hindi pa po talaga open yung licensing, ano, o yung training for license ham radio amateur. Ayan. So kasi marami pa po talagang COVID ngayon, ano? O maraming nahahawahan ng COVID, kaya naman doble-doble po ang pag-iingat nila, no? Ganoon din po, tumawag po tayo sa Calabarzon ng NTC at wala pa rin po silang exam. Ayan. So pwede naman po kayong gumamit ng mga SRRS ba tawag doon, na radio. Ayan. So mag-ano lang po kayo mag-secure lang po kayo ng permit to purchase. Ayan. So may mga dealer po na meron na po kayong pwedeng mabilan doon. Ayan, kasama nung radio. Ayan. So, yun po, no? So, again, maraming salamat, Sir W3ZQZ. Wag po kayong aalis. Tayo ay ano ba tawag doon? Station break. Breaker. This is BB1. Over.
Started at acknowledge Alpha Lima. Communication.
Ayan po, tayo po ay nagbabalik sa ating try to contact. Ayan, syempre magbasa po tayo ng comments ng ating mga, sabi nga ay taga-subaybay. Ano, ayan, nandiyan po si Ma'am Jersey D watching from the YouTube. Ayan, so wag niyo pong kalimutan, nasa YouTube din po tayo. Ayan, panoorin niyo po tayo doon. Watching from Muntinlupa City. Happy hapon, Sir BB1. Ayan, and W3ZQZ. Ayun na nga, no? So hapon na naman talaga. Ang bilis ng oras, ano? Talagang lumipas kaagad. Ayan, so hello po Ma'am Jersey D. Siyempre nandyan po yung ating sabi nga miss na miss ko na tong taong ito eh. Si Sir Alpha Romeo. Ayan, si Sir Anthony Reyes. Ang sabi niya po ay, good afternoon Sir BB1. Ayan, yun. Sabi dito ay, and Sir W3ZQZ. Ayan, Alpha Romeo watching here from Rosario, Cavite. Ayan, hello po. Ayan, sa inyong, dyan sa Rosario, Cavite, sa Lahoma. Ayan, paborito ko talaga yung Lahoma na yan eh. Hello Sir Anthony, miss na kita. Ayan, syempre, nandyan po yung ever beautiful na host ng Tourism to Try, si Jelly. Ayan, gandang hapon Sir Joey. Sabi niya, baka pwede ako dyan sa free antenna. Watching from Amadeo. Ayun. Pwede naman tayong libreng antenna, no? Meron dyan si Sir, so si Prop Route, meron dyan mga naitabing mga antena. Ayan. Pero itong antena natin, sige, gawa natin ang paraan. Pero alam nyo ba kung anong pwede natin gawin? Ito po yung suggestion ni Sir Robe. Ayan, ang ating host ng TryPH Media Live. Sabi niya, good afternoon to Sir ZQZ and thank you for the lesson. Ayan, thank you so much po, Sir ZQZ. I think we should give away the antenna to the one who can share this episode and give the best comment. Ayun. Sige nga, i-dare nga natin yan. Ano? Tingnan nga natin kung sino yung... at lagyan natin ng tawag dito, mechanics. Ayan. Sige, lagyan natin ng mechanics na kung sino yung mag-share. Marami siyang mai-share. Ganoon din naman, sabi dyan best comment. Ayan, so sino ba yung best comment? Ayun. Siyempre, yung mga taga-subaybay natin dyan, i-share nyo na po yung ating video ito. At titinan po natin kung sino po yung mananalo. Pinakamaraming share, pinakamaraming best comment. Ayan. Sige, mag-comment na kayo. Ayan. So siguro hanggang sa susunod na mga linggo, o until next week, Thursday, i-announce natin kung sino yung mananalo, syempre. And then, syempre kailangan may radyo ka. Yun yung idadagdag natin. Picturean mo yung iyong radio station, tapos i-post nyo po dito sa comments box natin. Ayan. So thank you Sir Robe. Syempre, nandyan din po yung isa nating supporter, si Sir Gerald Caholo. Ayan, si Gold Charlie. Good afternoon, BB1. Miss you na. Ayun na nga Nami-miss ko na rin kayo. Sige, di bale, at papasyal tayo paminsan-minsan. Pero syempre, tawag doon, yung distance, yun, malayo. Ayan, physical distancing. Ayan. At syempre, nandyan din si Kapata. Sabi niya, happy hapon mga ka-try! Watching from Silang, Cavite. Sir BB1, wala ba merienda dyan? Meron po. Ito, ayan kita niyo naman Nag-bake ng cookies si Kapata, kaya meron po akong merienda. Thank you so much sa Kapatang Elena. Ayan Huwag niyo pong kalimutang panoorin every Tuesday, 4 p.m. yung Lifestyle Ideas to Try. Ayan. And then, nandiyan din po si, kung merong Golf Charlie, meron namang Tango Charlie. Ayan, si Ma'am Telma Caholo. Ayan, hello BB1, watching beside Cafe Amadeo. Kayo na ang nagkakape. Kayo na. Happy for you. Sana all. Ayan, so enjoy nyo lang po yung kape nyo dyan na Ma'am Telma Caholo. Ayan, kasama siyempre si Sir Golf Charlie. At siyempre, nandiyan din may pahabol si Sir Anthony. Sabi niya, ayan miss you Sir BB1. Ayun na nga, nami-miss ko na nga si Alpha Romeo. At si Alpha Lima, shoutout po kay Mahal Alpha Lima. Ayan, Mahal, sana okay ka na dyan Yun, si Alpha Lima po ay yung ating isa sa mga supporter po ng ating Try to Contact. Ayan. Tapos, this is the best comment, BB. Ayun na nga, hindi ko naman sinabing yung word na best comment. Ano ba? Dapat i-elaborate mo yung best comment na yan. Ayan. So, yan po, ang mga ating taga-subaybay. At dyan na naman po nagtatapos yung ating sabi nga segment ngayong araw na ito. Pero syempre, nagpapasalamat muna tayo dun sa ating mga taga-subaybay. Ayan. So syempre, ang ating mga taga-subaybay ay sino ba taga-subaybay? Hindi. Dapat yung advocacy partners muna. Ayan. So pasalamatan po natin yung advocacy partners. Sila po ang patuloy na sumusuporta sa advokasya ng TryPH Media through their contribution by promoting our website and social media. Nandyan po ang RJ Brom Consulting, ang JRM Consulting, ang Platinum Partners. At ang gold naman po ay ang Salad Master, the Happy Giving Trading Company. Yan, sila po yung dealer, one of the dealer na Salad Master sa Pilipinas. At ang Platinum Digital Water Ionizer. At ang Milk Fruits Taiwan Bubble Tea, Malolos and Cabanatuan Branch. At yung ating mga silver partners, ayan, hello po kay Sir RDY, Marine Electronics. At kay Sir Limps, ayan, LMP Auto Car Care. At gayon din po naman ang Magno Transport, ayan, kay Sir YBY. At ang Shulamay Mags Tires and Battery Merchandising. At ang paborito kong lahoma, Funeral Homes. We honor the lives of your loved ones. Ayan, so maraming salamat po sa ating mga advocacy partner at gayon din po naman shoutout po doon sa mga taga Kabuanet. Ayan, kay Sir Sunny, kay Sir June, kay Giselle, kay Ronel. Ayan, salamat Ronel sa iyong napakagandang tawag dito, bopping machine. Ayan, kailangan maging advocacy partner ka namin dito, Sir Ronel ha. Ganoon din kay Sir Lito. Ayan, and then sa mga taga Bosch Philippines po, kay Sir William Go. Ayan, at kay Sir Golden Maranan at doon sa mga staff po dyan, ano, lalo na yung mga ganda babes dyan, ano. Ayan, so maraming salamat po. At ganoon din po naman yung ating mga kapamilya dyan sa probinsya po natin. Hello, ang aking mother at aking mga utol. Hello sa inyo dyan, ano. At syempre, huwag niyo pong kalimutan, panoorin muli ang Try to Contact. Ito po ay every Thursday at 5 p.m. Ayan, so don't forget din pong i-watch yung ating YouTube channel. Ayan, so dahil nasa YouTube din po tayo. And so muli, maraming salamat po, lalo na kay Sir W3ZQZ doon sa kanyang segment kanina na Enfed Antennas. Ayan, sa susunod pong mga segment natin. O next week naman po si YBX at si YBY. Ayan, so busy lang si YBY eh. Pero hopefully mabigyan niya po tayo ng mga insight ano doon sa mga radio units na nare-review niya. So maraming salamat po again mga ka-TryNation. Ito na naman po ang lingkod si BB1 at magkita-kita po tayo muli ano. At huwag kayong aalis. Ano? At sandali lang kasi mag-out na tayo. Ayan. Okay. So ito na naman po ang inyong likod si BB1 na nagsasabing, you never know unless you try. Over and out. Breaker, this is BB1. Over.